author, and I've got a blog called heatherchristo.com with thousands of free recipes on it. And about 8 years ago, I went from being like very traditional in my cooking and baking style to finding out that my children had food allergies. And so a lot of you may be in the same boat where for health reasons or personal choices, you don't want to eat animal products anymore, or you're supposed to lay off the gluten or the dairy. I sort of do all special dietary needs recipes, and my goal is to make them as delicious as possible so that you don't feel like you're being deprived. And I think recently, like in these last few years, that there's a lot of families where you're trying to make dishes for, oh, thanks, Pia, you did, she's gonna finish peeling these. You know, even if it's not you, maybe you have a child or a grandchild that is supposed to be staying away from certain foods, and you're like, well, what am I supposed to make? And my whole goal in life is to give you lots of resources so that you still feel like you can make delicious recipes, and it's not using a bunch of weird ingredients, and it tastes really good, because that's kind of all that matters in the end, I think. So I chose this particular recipe, which, by the way, came from my grandma Grace's original recipe, and I just made a few little tweaks to make it allergy friendly. And it's just a classic family favorite, and I think a really good choice for a class like this, and because you kind of can't screw it up. That's the truth. And there's a lot of room for flexibility with the ingredients. So I know we said 8 apples, but these were a little small when I went to the grocery store. So I wound up just buying a 3-pound bag, which was like 10 smaller apples. So now I know the weight. It should be about 3 pounds. And one of the reasons I love this recipe so much is that while we're doing apples today, you could substitute in pears. You could do frozen berries. I've even used like a canned pumpkin puree as a base, and added the same spices for pumpkin pie, and done a crisp with like a pumpkin pie filling instead of having to make a pie on Thanksgiving. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Here's one more, Pia. Thank you. So Granny Smith are my personal favorite for this recipe because I really like the tartness that they bring. It's like a nice, you know, counter to the sweetness. And I don't like it to be too sweet, especially since you probably have to put some vanilla ice cream on top. And these are just a really nice flavor, but use whatever you've got. Like if there's another apple that's close and near and dear to your heart, or just really easy to get, then by all means use that. And then for cutting it up, you could do chunks, but I get really nervous about the apples not cooking all the way through. I'm not a big fan of when you bite into like a pie or something and you're like, ooh, I don't think those apples were cooked. So one of my tricks always when baking with apples is to slice them really thinly. And I think that makes them, they kind of break down more easily. And sometimes it's almost like an applesauce effect. I mean, not quite that much, but I do love the softness. Pia, what's your favorite kind of fruit for a crisp?
Ooh,
I'm putting her on the spot.
I really like apple crisp and like berries.
Yeah, berries are great too. And by the way, you can combine apples and berries, but a good, just FYI, is that when you put berries in with the apples will not break down all the way. So they do still have that like bite to them. And it took me a couple times to figure out that there was like a chemical reaction going on, but still delicious. And Pia, you've been talking about apple pie for weeks, right?
Yeah.
So this is sort of like giving yourself the apple pie fix, but a lot easier, which is always good news. So hopefully you guys, either you're preparing along with me or you're just, you know, ready for when it's your turn, but it's really easy. You're just peeling these apples. Well, Pia's doing a rather interesting technique there. She's more like chipping the skin off, but it should be pretty easy. Oh, if you have an apple peeler, have you guys ever seen those? You know, where you like crank it? That's even, I know we do need one of those. That would be even easier. And I know that there's even like food processor attachments that make that really easy, but we are doing the old fashioned by hand method. And I kind of love that this recipe, you seriously need very little. Outside of the knife for slicing the apples and the peeler, you just use your hands, which can be a great advantage. Also, less dishes to clean up, right?
Okay, well, Heather, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to you to fully start your course. If you want to walk through, I don't know, materials or whatever before you get started, go ahead. But yeah, we're gonna start recording, and we have a lot of people here right now, so yeah.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm reintroducing myself. I'm Heather from heatherchristo.com. This is my daughter, Pia, who's come to assist me today. I've been giving her the hard job of peeling the apples. We are making the easiest apple crisp today. I am a trained chef, and my focus is on creating foods that everyone can eat. So if you have like a dietary restriction, maybe you're supposed to lay off the gluten, or dairy doesn't really agree with you, or maybe you have a child or a grandchild or a friend who is trying to eat plant-based or vegan or gluten-free, and the whole thing just feels like very overwhelming. My whole goal in life is to make sure that I can supply you with really easy, delicious recipes that don't use a bunch of weird ingredients and turn out delicious, because that's kind of all that matters. So this recipe felt like the best possible place to start for baking. It's an apple crisp. And I'm excited to teach you the basics of this recipe, and then at home you can kind of be really creative. It's foolproof, very simple ingredients, and I'm hoping you're gonna love it. It came from my mother's mother, so Grandma Grace's recipe. This goes back quite a long ways, with just a few small tweaks to make it so that we can eat it, even with dietary restrictions. So just going over supplies, we've got apples, and I just, before the class started, was doing a long-winded explanation of how much I love Granny Smith apples. That tartness is a really nice counter to the sweet topping, and my personal favorite. But you can absolutely use whatever type of apple you can get your hands on or is easily available for you. They're all going to be really good. So again, Pia did all the peeling. Thank you.
Butchered it.
There's some small butchering of the apple, but it doesn't really matter once we cut it up. And I said that what I like to do with the apples is to slice them really thinly so that they really break down in the baking process, and you don't wind up with like hard chunks of apple in the end and go like, I'm not really sure if that was cooked all the way through. Instead, in some areas, it almost has like an applesauce texture, which is actually wonderful. I also said that the recipe calls for 8 apples, but use your best judgment. My apples were a little small at the market, so I wound up just picking up a 3-pound bag that actually had 10 smaller apples in it, and that feels like the right amount. So maybe focus less on how many apples and like around 3 pounds. But I like a lot of fruit. So I always try to think about how the apples are going to cook down and get soft. And so they're obviously really going to like deflate in volume. Do you want to finish cutting these?
Sure.
We'll give her the big knife and let her finish that. Okay. And then just put them right in this bowl. So I over here, I'm going to focus on the topping. So when I have a crisp, I really want it to have that like good crumbly topping kind of with chunks in it. I know that doesn't sound that great, but think about like the topping on a coffee cake. Like the crumbles are the best part. I don't want it to be like a loose topping. It also, besides like being delicious and having a great texture, it helps it to cook in a nice way so that it's not like so flat and evenly ground. It's, I like the chunks. So ingredients wise, I called for 1 cup of gluten-free flour, and I wanted to show you, obviously there's a ton of gluten-free flours on the market. Usually they are not all interchangeable. Usually it's kind of complicated. For this recipe, it is not. You can use any gluten-free flour blend. It doesn't matter if it has xanthan gum in it or not, but I was gonna show you my 2 favorite. I've made it with both. It turned out really well both times. This is just like a Bob's Red Mill all-purpose gluten-free baking flour. And this one is the same thing, but it's called 1-to-1. Either one works really, really well. So, and if you have another brand, that's great too. And you're just gonna put 1 cup in a bowl. Then you've got the oats, which is really like the heart of it. And another great thing, gluten-free oats. Doesn't matter if you want to go with the old-fashioned oats, which these are. You can do quick cook oats, kind of whatever you have on hand works. So another way that this is a really flexible recipe. So I'm going to add 3 cups of these oats to the flour. And then in here, I've got 1 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And I want to get like all the dried ingredients mixed in together before I start with the fat. This is kosher salt, and I'm just going to add a teaspoon. And then we've got sugar, another place where you can do whatever you want. This is like dark brown sugar, but you could use light brown, you could use white sugar. You just, whatever you've got on hand. I think that's kind of the motto of cooking and baking during a pandemic. When you don't want to be running out to the store all the time, you just get really flexible and make the best of with what you've got. Right? Don't you feel like we've been kind of more creative this year? I mean, we're all doing the best we can. So I'm just going to take a spoon, only because I'm trying to be sort of polite for you right now.
Oh, did I miss the amount of sugar to add?
Oh, it was 1 cup. Thank you for asking. It was 1 cup. I just put it in a measuring cup to make it look cuter than digging it out of a bag. But 1 cup, any kind of sugar you want. So 1 cup of flour, 3 cups of oats, 1 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon baking soda, and 1 teaspoon cinnamon. Everything's a 1 in front of it except for the oats, which is a 3. Then we've got the fat part of it. Oh, look, we can get rid of this. This is good. Let me just clean up. Okay, here's the apples, by the way, before I finish this crust. Pia?
Yeah.
Clean hands, ready on deck. This is cinnamon sugar, 2 tablespoons of sugar. Again, it could have been brown, white, whatever, and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. You get to toss the apples. I'm gonna have her do this now so that they can kind of like sit in the sugar and start to marinate and like they kind of like weep a little bit of their juices, which is good. We want it to start to get mushy. Can you share the ingredient measurements? Absolutely.
I was going to say, Heather, I'll go ahead and type it in the chat while you say it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me if you need me to repeat it. I'm ready anytime. So I've got this, all the dry ingredients, and then I've got a cup of coconut oil. Here's another place. You could use vegan butter. You could use, if you're not worried about dairy, you could use regular butter. You could use Crisco. You could use, I don't know, I guess that's it. Then we've got coconut oil. This is my personal favorite because I love the flavor and I love all of the health benefits that coconut oil brings to the table. And I have actually found that it does a really, really beautiful job browning. Oh, Pia's now eating dessert. Okay, so Pia asked me this question earlier. She said, Mom, does that coconut oil need to be melted? It does not need to be melted. You could melt it, and then you would have a nice even crumble, but you wouldn't get those chunks that we were talking about. So I like to use it when it's still solid. This is really solid though. It's getting cold up here. I'm in British Columbia right now, and we are already feeling
The sun's like setting.
Yeah, the sun is maybe going down right now. It's already starting to get dark. We're definitely feeling winter coming a little earlier than we would be used to down in the States. So you can see this is a really like graceful process here. I just have clean hands in this bowl, and I'm like just scrunching it in.
Really moist.
Yeah, real moist. Can you bring over the baking dish? Okay, so here's another place to be flexible. I saved this nice big 9x13 lasagna style pan to show you guys, but because I didn't have a second matching pan to pull my magically baked crisp out when we're done with this example, I just used what I had because I thought that was realistic. So it doesn't have to be one of these 9x13 pans. I'm actually using like a
Iron.
yeah, well, you could use a cast iron. I've done that before. This one's like an enamel, almost like a Dutch oven for baking. That's what's in the oven right now, almost ready to show you guys. You could use a Pyrex, like it's pretty flexible. I'm sure everybody at home has something that is oven safe and would work to put a crisp in. Okay, can you pop the apples in?
Like,
Here.
this
Yeah.
could go a couple different
There we
ways.
go. Yeah, let's just try to get them in there. I have crisp kind of all over me right now.
I'll save the rest for me to eat.
No, put those in there. We need all of them.
Like,
Yeah, put them all in.
but I want to eat.
You don't want to do the work and then waste it. Okay, perfect. So we have a nice thick layer of cinnamony sugar apples in there. And then, oh my gosh, okay. Excuse my hands right now, but I hope you can kind of see this texture is like nice and clumpy. And I'm just gonna shovel it on top of the apples. There's nothing really graceful about this process,
This is a
but I'm making a mess. That's okay. That's all right. This is really kind of it. And I just like to make sure that some of those big chunks are on the top. And then some of the parts that are like a little less chunky, kind of around the edges where they can soak up the bubbling apple and sugar.
juices.
Yes, the juices. Okay, that's kind of it. I am a little bit of a mess here.
A little bit.
Okay, can you see this? So I forgot to talk about the oven. You want to preheat that to 350 degrees. And this is actually going to bake longer than an hour. I tend to find, especially in a big pan like this, it's closer to like 80 or 90 minutes. And in those last like 20 to 30 minutes, that's when the fruit really starts to break down and get super soft. And the edges are like golden and bubbly. So that's why it's worth it in the end. Pia, well, I washed all this stuff off. I'm going to wash it off my hands. Why don't you tell them what other kind of crisps we like to make?
Like flavors?
Yeah.
Well, once you made a really good caramel apple crisp.
Oh, that's true.
Then there were like berry crisps.
Berry crisps
We've
are
done,
delicious. And you can, by the way, you can just use frozen berries.
Strawberry rhubarb.
Strawberry rhubarb is great. Not real seasonal, but very delicious. And one of the great things about that is that you could truly just buy frozen berries and like dump the frozen berries in here.
Blackberry sounds really good.
Toss them with a little sugar and cinnamon, let them sit, and then put this over it, bake it. So then you don't even have to peel the apples. Pears right now, so delicious. I've done a pear crisp and even added a little cocoa powder to this and some powdered ginger. That was delicious. And I know I mentioned earlier, since we have Thanksgiving coming up, if you do not have the time or the skill level to make a full-blown pie, which does get a lot more complicated, especially if you're trying to avoid gluten and dairy and eggs, then this is a really great solution. And you can even just use canned pumpkin puree and whisk in like the spices that you like and some vanilla and maybe a little coconut milk and use that as the base instead of having to make a full pumpkin pie. It's like a very similar experience. Okay, I'm going to pull out the finished one, put this in the oven so you can see how it turns out. Okay, you want to trade me? So you can see again, this is the baking dish that I use, like the same one that I would, you know, roast chicken in or make a shepherd's pie in or rice. And it worked beautifully for a crisp. We have this nice, this is all like gooey and caramelized over here. The topping is really golden. I feel like we probably have to dish some up, Pia. Are you willing to be a taste tester?
I mean, yeah, sure.
Feels like that's your duty right now.
It does.
Okay. Here we go. It's going to be really hot.
I know.
Though.
I'm like,
I can hear it
can,
like sizzling.
kind of burn.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you don't want to. Oh, but can you? I wish you guys could see, like the apple is so soft.
It's like applesauce.
It is. This one did turn out like applesauce because we really sliced those apples thin, and then with the golden crumble topping, so delicious. And this was super, super easy. You do need, they make the best vegan vanilla ice cream now from like coconut milk or cashew milk. And I'm sure Pia is definitely going to need some of that. Okay, so that was it. I mean, it was literally that easy. Does anybody have any questions? I guess not. Hopefully it was so easy that it was pretty straightforward.
I think I was gonna say, I feel like Jessica's wiping her hands off to say something.
Oh.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm still peeling and cutting apples, so I'm not quite there yet, but
Okay, good. Well, I hope it at least sounded like it was going to be a straightforward process.
yeah, I know it sounds like it's gonna be great.
What do you add the coconut oil to? It cut off, Jasmine. What did it say? What do you add the coconut oil to?
Proportion wise.
Oh, it was 1 cup.
There.
Oh, there we go. 1 cup oil. Yeah. Vegan butter, coconut oil, whatever fat you're going to use. It just was about 1 cup. And you just mix it in with your fingers.
Should we get in there?
Yeah. 1 cup oil. Oh, 1 cup brown. Okay. People are looking for the measurements again.
I'll write this down while you talk.
Okay. 1 cup gluten-free flour, 1 cup sugar, any kind of sugar, 1 cup coconut oil, 3 cups gluten-free oats, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, 1 teaspoon kosher salt, 1 teaspoon baking soda. That's it. And like 8 to 10 apples, which is about 3 cups. I'm sorry, 3 pounds.
So you feel it cooled down enough.
Oh, I was gonna try it. She just smushed it around to cool it off. So Jasmine, is there any better way that I can give the measurements, or do you think they're fine in the chat box?
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, I'll keep them in the chat, and I'll keep this course open so people can, either write it down or
Okay.
Anything. I do have the materials on the website as well, so
Great.
people can always refer back to that. And then obviously this video will also be available on our YouTube channel for people to refer back to.
Great. I'm so glad. Well, thank
Hi,
you.
this is Rhonda. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The question I had, and I might have missed it from the beginning, why do you peel the apples? Do they need to be peeled?
I peel the apple because while the apple flesh will kind of break down and get really soft, the skin doesn't break down. So if you don't mind having apple peels, but it's 2 different desserts. Like one will be a little more rustic, which is great. And then if you peel them, they really get soft. It's more like
Okay.
apple. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, they're definitely apple varieties if you just do not want to deal with that, like a Gala or a Honey Crisp or something that would lend itself a lot better to like leaving the skin on than a Granny Smith, which has that like really thick, tough skin. That one might be a little harder. Yeah.
Can you use regular flour?
Yeah, you absolutely could. So like I said, I converted this from my grandmother's recipe, and she definitely used regular flour and butter. But I will tell you, even from the diehard traditionalists in my family, what they found they liked better than butter was the coconut oil. It was more popular across the board, even with the people that did not want the recipe tampered with. It's a great update.
Would the flour be the same proportions?
Yes, absolutely. Or if you use butter, same amount, just 1 cup.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Can I just ask you really quick?
Yeah.
Everything looks delicious, and you're so cute, by the way. You need to have your own show. You look like you're like, oh, like kind of like a 1940 show. It's so cute. I love it.
YouTube channel. You guys can go check our cooking videos over there.
Totally, I gotta watch them. I work for a retirement community, so my supervisor and I are gonna do this like on Zoom for them, and we're trying to get them to eat a little healthier and whatever. Yeah. Even though they're not always all about it, but we try to make it like do the vegan or dairy free, and so we push that a little bit. Of course, cute. You know, I was just going to ask you really quick with the apples, and I'm so silly because I never bake and cook. My poor 8-year-old, you know, I just kind of pretend to know what I'm doing. Anyway, did you put the cinnamon and the baking soda and the salt on the apples, or no, just the cinnamon?
No, the apples were all by themselves, and then to the apples, see, thank you for catching that. There was extra measurement. I had in a little bowl 2 tablespoons of sugar and a half teaspoon of cinnamon.
Oh, okay. All
Great.
Right.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Sprinkled on the apples and then shoved them away to let them sit. But the baking soda, the cinnamon, and the salt that goes in the topping, that went in with the dry ingredients.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right.
Very
okay.
For that.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
For that.
By the finished.
It's good, yeah. I was just gonna say, if anybody has any other questions, you know, while we have Heather here, now would be the perfect time. Anyone?
Jasmine, I'll also say I'm always available for help. If you can message me on my website or email me, it's heatherchristo@gmail.com. If anyone's on Instagram, like DM me. I'm really here to help people make cooking and baking easier. So I'm always happy to help.
Sure. Okay, that's great to know. I mean, well, I guess if we don't have any other questions, Heather, you can feel free to hop off. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stay on so that the chat will still be there. But yeah, thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Feel free to stay on. I'll have the ingredients here or hop off.
This is Rhonda again.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Just sitting here thinking about this. Since this was for the senior list, the only observation I guess I would say I would have is that if this was a dish geared towards seniors, to cut the recipe in half, because that particular portion would probably be too much food or too much dessert for just a couple.
Yeah.
Is what I was thinking.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think this is just kind of a generic. I think Heather wanted to make it simple with like the 1 cup to 1 cup ratio, but definitely since if it's going to be serving less people, cut the portions in half and feel free to, I guess, kind of mix and play with the ingredients.
Thank you. Or what are they? The ramekin, the little dessert dishes.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.